And by the way, I have not heard anything the whole time they've been working.
Okay.
StreamYard's filtered it out, so don't worry about it.
Okay.
And everyone's hearing our inside baseball. Hey, everybody.
Hey, there they are.
What?
Hi.
What's up, guys? Welcome to hashtag Indie Summer Week 2 wrap up. This has been a fun week, Abby Matthews.
It really has been a fun. I mean, it's been extra fun behind the scenes for me because I'm doing the homework, man.
Yeah, you're like right in the thick of it, and I'm actually gonna start working on my cover stuff next week.
Hmm.
And I full disclosure, I worked on some cover mock-ups with AI with ChatGPT, and I think that it did an okay job, but not something that I would feel comfortable publishing. So,
Yeah.
but what um and kind of like with a lot of things with ChatGPT and Claude and some of the other AI chatbots, where I find them useful is helping me to iterate on things or to generate ideas,
Hmm.
not to do the work for me. I, I am not a use AI to get you out of doing work, but it does help me to expand my thinking and to think of things that I have not thought about. So
Hmm.
I've used that to like, as I'm coming up with concepts. What does this look like? Okay, I like that, but I would add this element or that element, and it helps me to get the questions solidified in my mind that I would then talk to a designer about because I've kind of iterated on that a little bit and I've gotten an idea of what that could look like.
Yeah.
So, it just I um
Now you kind of have a template because
right.
sometimes, I mean, if you're not a visual artist, sometimes you don't know how to speak to visual artists. And
Yes.
so if you have something visual that you can show a visual artist,
Yes.
oftentimes that's sort of key to clearing up any miscommunications that you might have. So the
Yes.
if you have that's if you have a really concrete idea of what you want, because let's face
Right.
it, some of us might be open. You might
Yeah.
not have any idea of what you want, and you can let the artist lead you down that path. So, like, I had an idea of the style that I wanted.
Yeah.
I pretty much kind of knew that I wanted the car on the front,
Mhm.
but I gave essentially free reign to the illustrator that I hired and was like super tickled with what came out of it. So we can,
Love it.
we can kind of walk through that. But I think the thing that everybody has to realize today, there's a caveat. The way that Abby Matthews, am going about designing my cover is not necessarily the same way that you, Hank Garner, is going to go about designing your cover. And you are going to have different priorities and goals in the end, and I'm going to have different priorities and goals, and everybody here in the chat and watching back at home, everybody has their own essentially a driving force behind this cover. And for some of us it's budget, for some of us it's time, for some of us we are, at the beginning of what we hope is to be a long career, and some of us are like, no, I want to get this book out because I want to give it to 10 people, so
Right.
whatever your end goal is with this is really going to drive some of the decisions that you're making here today.
Right.
So, let's go
Mm.
ahead and just like say, I want to say that caveat because I know that in the end, I'm sorry, but my goal is sales. My goal
Yeah.
is I want to be the next person with 500,000 copies sold as a self-published author. Like I want to
100%.
have a bunch of books under my belt. Like, and I'm going to put a little bit of money in up front with the idea that it's going to move me closer to my goal in the long run. But
Right.
I also am very sensitive to the fact that not everybody here feels that way. So we're going to do our best to kind of give everybody this gamut of like, these are things that you could do, and we're all
Right.
going to make different choices, and that's okay in
Right.
every sense
What
of the word. So,
Let's start at this place, Abby, because you are a visual artist. You have
mhm.
a fine arts degree. You
Yeah.
are the definition of an artist. Um, I paint with words. I do good to draw my name,
Mhm.
much less design a cover. Now I am proficient in Photoshop. I've used Photoshop for years, and but to me that's different. I have two kids that have graduated from art school and are graphic designers, and they use Illustrator primarily,
Yeah.
and they draw vector images, and all of that is wonderful. I know how to use the tools.
Yeah.
I understand how they work. Getting a picture from my brain and translating it to the screen, there's a disconnect. There's a chasm,
Yeah.
if you will. It's not just a disconnect. There's a chasm, a gully, if you're from the South. Um, and my brain doesn't work that way.
You
But I
can't
can
get
take
yourself to the other side of that creek, can
Yeah,
you?
right, right. And I can use Photoshop. I can take images, I can manipulate them, I can filter them, I can blend layers together, I can mask and I can do a pretty good job, but I'm having to work with something that someone else created because I
Yeah.
can't create visuals from scratch. I just can't. And that's one reason that I kind of iterate on things with Chat GPT to
Yeah.
give me ideas because I just can't generate it myself.
Yeah.
Um, my first question to you is, um, why would you and there's no right or wrong answer here. Why would you as a visual artist not
Do it
design the cover
myself.
yourself? Yeah, yeah. What's like was that ever a thought to you?
Okay, so we kind of got to back this bus up, Hank,
Okay, back it up.
because
Beep, beep,
when
beep.
you have an art degree, you have to specialize in a medium.
Okay.
My medium was fibers, which means I did mostly weaving and off loom construction, surface design, fabric dyeing, that sort of thing.
Were you the one that got the degree in basket weaving that everyone threatened me with if I didn't?
Yes.
Okay, okay, gotcha. I wondered who you were.
So I have taught drawing. I taught drawing for years, but I
Okay.
taught drawing one at the high school level. I am very good if you set something in front of me, I
Yeah.
can draw it. If you tell me to make something up in my head and draw it, I can't because I have that weird thing where I don't see pictures in my brain.
Interesting.
I have to see it in front of me to be able to draw it. I would make the world's worst illustrator. So when I taught high school, a lot of what I taught was actually more sculptural.
Yeah.
Because that was what my background was in.
Okay.
Um, I'm great at sewing. I can, I mean, I've always got a basket of yarn and some knitting needles sitting
Touche.
by me. It's a very different kind of art that
Okay.
I do. I've even done historic process photography, but I stay away from things like painting and drawing. So I know how to talk to those people,
Okay.
but I'm just not one of them. So
You see, I do see pictures in my head. When I read a book, I have created the whole world and I'm in that world. And that's one of the great things about reading for if you have a brain like me. Um, but I just lumped all of you visual arts people into the same bucket. I didn't
we're all different genres, so to
dang
speak.
it. Dang
And
it. That just dashed my hopes.
here's the weird thing is I think in words. I don't think in pictures.
That's
And
wild.
my
That's actually
husband thinks
wild.
that's what makes me a good writer is because the pictures don't get in the way.
Interesting. I've never thought about it. I do love when I'm laying out a book and when I'm editing even, um, how the page looks
Mhm,
matters to me. If it's
mhm.
a wall of text, I go in and I start cutting and I look, especially if it's dialogue, how can I chop this up? Because
Right.
the look, the flow of the text, it matters a lot to me. Like
You get lost in it. Yeah,
yeah,
and it's a pacing thing too.
it is. Yeah.
Like, so, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Look what I see. Emily says, I guess we can't hire Abby to do our cover. No, you do not want to hire me.
I mean, you
Uh,
could if you wanted a knitted cover.
if you wanted me to stitch something on the front of like a piece of
Okay,
canvas
hear
and
me
glue
out,
it.
Abby. Hear me out. Knitted cozy mystery covers. I think you might have cracked the code.
I
What's more
am not gonna
cozy than a
lie.
knitted book cover?
I loved all those like old lady knitting
Yeah.
cozy mystery sort of
Oh
things.
yeah.
Like I'm in, I think I was just born an old lady. So um, but anyway, I was knitting sweaters for trees when I was in college. That was my final project.
That's so funny.
So yeah. So I'm gonna ask you, Hank, because
Yeah,
you have a whole bunch of books out in this world. Have you made any mistakes in cover designing over
of
the years
course.
that you would like to share with us? Like, give us
Well,
the dirt, spill the tea.
one of the we talked the other day when we had our show with our illustrious cover designer
Yeah.
Jeff Brown. Uh, that I made the mistake first off of doing my own covers
Mhm,
because I am proficient in Photoshop. I
mhm,
do know how to do that. And when Jeff was talking about the difference in a professional looking cover and one that looks okay, but when you really start looking at it and the lighting on the layers don't quite match up, and it just you said it's an okay cover. You
mhm,
know, the difference in an okay cover and a good cover, the difference in those two things are sales. Like,
mhm.
especially when the marketplace is as competitive as it is now, and indie books are expected to perform like trad pub books and to look like trad pub books. You got to dial it in. You got
Yeah,
to. And one of the earliest mistakes that I made was trying to have a cover that did too much when
yeah.
I wasn't ready to deliver too much.
You don't have the skills for that.
I don't have the skills
Yeah,
for it. I can get close
yeah,
and I can make it look good, but it doesn't look great. And like I say, the difference in a good looking cover and a great looking and a good looking cover 7, 8 years ago might have been a
different.
bestseller. It will not be a bestseller today.
So
Uh, one piece of advice, I'll just tag this and then I'll let you have it. One piece of advice that Jeff gave us the other day, and this is something that I figured out, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what I figured out, but when he said it, I was like, he said that typography
mhm,
matters more. And if you can afford a great designed cover, you're going to do it yourself. Make sure your typography is perfect and maybe have a more ambiguous cover, maybe a symbolic cover,
graphic, more, yeah.
just maybe a subtle thing, and
Mhm.
have your typography carry the weight. And when I kind of decided to dial mine back and really focus on the typography, that's when I made a difference.
Yeah.
So that was
So the pieces that you need to think about here, and this is where I think Jeff had an amazing piece of advice, which is to find another cover and use it as a template. So if you
yeah,
have Procreate, if you have Photoshop, I believe you
right,
could even do it in Canva. It's going to be a little harder because you can't make your layers transparent so that you can
right,
match things up and then pull a layer out.
right,
But if you have a program where you can put a cover in and then you can start like put your title over the other title. So there's this thing called kerning with your typography, and that's the space between your letters, the space between your lines. You want to look at that because a lot of times, like I notice when I'm making a presentation in Canva and I pull the title piece over and I start to type, it will give me big letters, but sometimes the spacing between the lines is so wide that it looks off. So if you are looking at a cover and you're like, something about this looks off, think about, is it the space between my lines? If your title goes on to 2 lines and you have this weird, awkward space in between those 2 lines that's just blank, it's just empty, that could be the difference between good and great. Pull those together, make it tighter. So kerning is one thing to look for. The other thing that I see just from an arts perspective, when I look at covers that are, we'll put more in like the amateur hobbyist sort of category, right? A homegrown cover. If you're going to use clip art or an illustration or something like that that you have found online, right? There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If you're using one, not a big deal. If you're using 2 and they don't quite match, it looks weird. So say you have 2 pieces of clip art and the styles are kind of close, but kind of not. Like they weren't done by the same artist in the same line. You're going to have a cover that while the image you're using makes sense, the difference in the 2 styles might be just enough that your brain goes, that looks homegrown. So if you're trying to avoid something like that, make sure if you're using illustrations, icons, any piece of clip art that you have found online, if you can make sure that they all come from the same package, so to speak, you're going to have a better cover in the end. So that's the other thing. And it looks like, yep, you just pulled over the one I was about to.
Yeah, Marilyn just mentioned if you cannot afford Photoshop, get paint.net free, though they ask for a donation if you like. It's very little Photoshop can do that paint.net cannot. I have not used paint.net in years. I'm gonna take your word for it, Marilyn. I will look into it, but I posted a link here to photop.com. Photop.com is um is a website designed to operate just like Photoshop, and they built it from the ground up. They didn't rip off Adobe in any way. They recreated the tools from scratch, and it is 100% free to use. And all of the Photoshop keyboard shortcuts work exactly the same. If you hit Control T, it opens up free transform. All of the if you're like me and used Photoshop for years, your fingers automatically go to the key bindings. They all work. It has a banner ad on the side of the screen. You can donate some money to turn off the banner ads, or you can look at them, whatever. But you can create layers, and like Abby was talking about, you can take your text, lay it over the other, change the opacity so that you can see through it, drop that down to 50% or so, and then line up the kerning in the text and get it just like it, so that your letters flow together and they line up together. And that's a free way that you can mimic those covers like Jeff was instructing us to do the other day. And there's a bunch of other tools. And Kara said I use Pixlr. That's another one that's free and open source is, let me see if I have it installed here. I can't remember.
When you're looking for it, I'll tell you, between free and Photoshop is a thing called Procreate. And I'm going to bring up Procreate.
Yes. But that's only for iPad, right?
I think it's only for iPad. But if you have an iPad and you have a stylus, right?
Yes.
A lot of illustrators and graphic designers use Procreate, and it has the same layering ability. It's a very easy learning curve to pick it up, but you have all the brushes and the pens, and you can make things look as if they were done on paper. And so if you wanted to, so like this was actually an illustration from Timmy Failure. I was going to turn it into like a t-shirt or something, right? So you can put an illustration on your bottom layer. You can open up layers on top, and you can trace your own elements. So if you wanted to make something that looked very charming and very hand done, you didn't have the drawing skills to draw it on your own, but you could put another illustration behind it to use as your model. let me tell you something that I tell my middle school child all the time, and I'm sure her art teacher hates it, but I taught fine arts for years and years and years. And I'm going to tell you, artists since the beginning of time have traced things, and no
Of
one needs
course.
to feel bad about it.
Yeah.
So,
And if you don't have an iPad, and my daughter, who is a graphic designer, uses that every single day to
Procreate,
make stuff for, yeah, the iPad, whatever it's called, Procreate.
Procreate, yeah.
Um, if you don't have an iPad and you don't have a stylus, Krita, Krita,
Mhm.
is a free and open source software for Windows, for Mac, for Linux that operates very similar to that. It's kind of a between Photoshop and Illustrator, and a lot of the key bindings are similar, not exactly the same, but you can pull in that other layer like you talked about and trace over it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So Krita is, I'll just post that in the chat here as
So
well. So
let's
that's
talk
something you can
about
look into.
this. Emily brought up a good point. If I have a painting, now I'm going to assume it's a painting that you have not done, Emily. If it's not your own original work,
Right,
and you take a photo of it, you still have to have the artist's permission to
right.
use it if you're using it anywhere in your book. So that's the thing you guys are going to have to be really careful about. And I say this because let me turn off my notifications here because my family they will ding me all day long. Like, Mom, bring me a bottle of water. Get it yourself. You know where I keep it. So I actually watched a really interesting copyright video the other day. So now we're kind of talking about copywriting, and you guys have to be really careful about this because if you are going to put the book out into the world, you're going to make money off it, and you use someone's copyrighted image, you have to have it licensed. So they have to know and approve that you're using that item, and you have to pay for it some way, shape, or form. This one lady used Canva to
Okay.
create, and she had Canva Pro, and she was making those. Is it like low or no content books that you can sell on Amazon? They're like journals, diaries, they have
Yeah.
prompts, they have some things. So she had actually even used on Canva Pro, there was like a rectangle that already had the lines in it or whatever, right? But she did not have the copyright, even though she had Canva Pro. She did not have the copyright. Canva Pro license only allows you so many printed copies. And she sold thousands of dollars worth of these books. And then Amazon shut her down and said, we will put your listing back up when you can show us that you have the copyright to all the images that you have in your book. And she thought because she was using a Canva Pro account, she had the correct copyright, she had the license, and she did not. And then Amazon took the book down. So if you license an image from, say, Adobe Stock, how do you acknowledge that in your credentials? So that's really good because and now we're kind of getting into like some really, really tricky stuff here. And I feel like I need to caveat this by saying you guys need to find out exactly what type of license you have, because there are different types of creative licenses. Some are okay for print, some are not. Some only give you so many copies. So you really have to read the fine print if you're using stock images. I believe you want royalty-free images. Am I correct, Hank? If you
Royalty free, or with a
Creative
license.
Commons licenses.
Yeah, Creative Commons is usually you're free to do whatever with. And then there are derivatives of that that are like, uh, you can license this for replication, you can license it for to edit it and make something new. You just have to read the so if you buy something from Adobe Stock, usually that carries a license that once you pay for it, you're free to use it in whatever manner you want, but you have to pay for it. So different stock art places have different requirements, but I think Adobe Stock is like once you pay for it, it's yours to do with what you want. I think. So verify that before
Yeah,
before you slap it
definitely
on a
look.
book cover.
Every site seems to have a slightly different flavor of what you're allowed
Exactly.
and not allowed to do. So be very, very careful
Right.
when you're using it. So places like Upsplash, Pixabay, free downloads for photos doesn't necessarily mean that they're free for commercial use. So that's the
Right.
other thing. Many
For
things
commercial use. Thank you. That's the phrase
yeah,
I couldn't think of a second ago.
free for personal use and free for commercial use are two completely different things, you guys.
Yes.
Free for personal use means you can download it, you can slap it on, whatever you're doing at home, and it's not a big deal. You're not making money off it. That's the thing.
Right.
The moment you make money off of something, you have a copyright issue. So, that's the other reason I cannot. I'm sorry, you guys. I can't turn this off for some reason. I keep hitting, and then I even texted them and said, "Stop! No one texts me anymore." And they're keeping it up as a joke, I'm sure. Thank you, family.
That
Teens, guys.
as a
Hashtag teens.
as a father of 5 smart aleck kids, and I yes, I edited myself as I said that. Yeah, it's real. That's, I feel you, Abby.
I may or may not feed them tonight. So okay. Yeah, check everything out. And that was, I'm going to be honest, part of the reason I went to a professional is
Yeah.
because I wanted someone else to suss all that crap out for me.
Yes. Yes, and that's actually a brilliant point to make is that when one thing about being an indie author is you all of a sudden wear all of the hats,
Yep.
and you have to be so careful about reading the fine print on everything. And when you hire a cover designer, you don't have to read the fine print. When you pay them, they are expected to know all those answers and to handle to jump all those hurdles for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyway, let's see. I noticed that we had one question from NJ that we did
Okay.
not cover. Let's see. We talked about Emily's paintings. Let me try and uncheck that one. Here we go. NJ wants to know, is there a way to have people vote on cover art on W? So I would say you can use the poll. There's like a poll
Yeah.
thing. You might have to put a couple images and label them A, B, C, and then
Right.
in the poll say A, B, C, and then let people vote on which one that
Yeah.
they think is the best or the one that you would want. I know David Sarah oftentimes puts multiple images in some of his posts, and but he does like writing prompts based on pictures, and so he'll put 1, 2, 3, and then just put in the bottom, tell me which you like or which one of these speaks to you. So then people could then answer in the comments if the poll piece gets a little tricky. But yeah, absolutely. Put your cover art on W and let everybody weigh in. Now, that kind of leads us into what was happening with me today, Hank, and you
Yeah.
guys, because once you start asking for opinions, y'all, you best be in it to have to wade through what everyone thinks.
Yeah.
And
Because opinions are like,
they're like buttholes. Everybody's
yeah,
got one.
everybody's got
Some
one.
of them are
Everybody thinks but
sticky.
mine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but no, you can ask people's opinions and that's great, but you're not always going to get a consensus. And then suddenly the waters have been muddied. And so keep that in mind when you go to ask people for their opinions. So should we talk a little bit about what who I hired, what I did, and the process?
Yeah.
And then I can
Why
show
why
those
not?
covers and we can talk about how I muddied the waters this morning asking everybody's opinion.
Yes.
Okay.
Because
So
this is an important part for people to consider.
yeah. So I did a brief, just
Okay.
like we posted in the homework on Monday. I went through, I answered all the questions, just like you guys did. And then I ended up going to Readsy. So now I'm going to preface this by saying that my ultimate end goal with this book, it is my debut book, and I hope it is the first of many books. And because I want to build a brand, I was looking for an illustrator that I could work with, not just for this book, but over the course of several books. And I do have a backlog of books on my computer, as Hank likes to call me out on. And I was looking for somebody whose illustrative style was indicative of not just my genre, but would also work with multiple books that I have, in my back pocket. And so
Yeah.
I sent the brief into Reedsy. I got a couple quotes. I ended up going with a guy, his name is Finn Dean. So Finn, and I should put his links in the chat here so everybody can see. But Finn is in the UK. He is an illustrator and an artist, and an illustrator and a cover designer. So I wanted a completely illustrated cover that would be something very typical in middle grade. And so that kind of narrows down the people that have that skill set to illustrate themselves.
Right.
And part of why I chose him, for me, it was going to be very important that my book be able to compete with the traditional market. And I wanted something that was going to look as if it came from the traditional market. Therefore, I hired an illustrator from the traditional market. So that alone upped my price tag, as did the fact that he was illustrating it. So when you can just use graphics, when you can use royalty-free images, if you have a cover that's
Right.
not so complicated and not done by hand, it's not going to be quite as expensive as when you hire an artist to actually draw it for you. So
Sure.
I did do that. So again, my price tag went up, and then my price tag went up again.
Right. Right.
So, I'm aware that that's not a path that everybody wants to go down, but it was great fun getting to tell him what I wanted. And you send, as part of your brief, you send like the jacket copy that goes on the back of your book. And you also send who your ideal market is. And, the good thing is I already had both of those pieces set and ready to go. And when I
Yeah.
sent them to Finn, he immediately got it, because he himself had been part of my ideal readership when he was a child. So I'm trying to read reluctant readers who are boys. And Finn said he himself was writing a middle grade fantasy for reluctant readers who were also boys. So I was able to find someone who's in the traditional market. He's actually an agented illustrator. He's worked on covers for the big five, but he's also writing a story that is similar to mine. So he was able to take that, and he said to me, "Can I please read part of it?" Now, he did say, Jeff Brown, right, this week said he doesn't always read the author's books. I just ended up sending him the first chapter, because what he proposed to put on my cover was a scene that happened in the first chapter of my book. So I sent him the first chapter and he loved it. So I felt like I really got paired with somebody great. So to give you guys a little bit of backstory about what he decided to do, the two main characters in my story are 6-inch tall twin brothers, right, who are like the Dukes of Hazzard on a farm, and they make their own car out of a coffee can, actually out of the old Judge coffee can, which is on my desk and holds all my pencils. But this is the coffee can that's in my story. And I sent Finn a picture, and he said to me, "I want to make it like Mr. Toad's Wild Ride," which we all know I love Mr. Toad. He's my all-time favorite character. So this is what Finn ended up sending me. So this was the first rough sketch. For those of you guys that don't know what a rough sketch is, Finn took a napkin and just very quickly sketched out his ideas so that he could say to me, "Is this kind of what you're thinking?" right? So my little car, it's the coffee can. The wheels were made from the wheels of a toy tractor that the boys took off a toy tractor. So Finn made, here it is, the back wheels bigger than the front wheels.
Mm-hmm.
The engine is housed in an old tuna can that is hinged to the front of the car, and it's stuffed with a D battery and a bunch of wires. That's how the boys have made the engine, right? Which when you're a kid, let's face it, you think that's all it takes. I still think
Right.
that's what it takes, right? Like that's what's in the front of everybody's car is just a battery and some wires.
Mm-hmm.
He's got the two headlights are bulbs from a flashlight that the boys stole out of a flashlight from the shed. Mrs. Hatley's misplaced reading glasses are the windshield of the car. So he's got all the pieces. And he said he was basically thinking he'd have the boys on this wild ride. And in the front, he would have blades of grass or dandelions, something to show that they are small.
The scale. Yeah.
The scale, right? And then he just had the title and my name. So you wouldn't think that this was anything that was a big deal. But when I got that, I sat and I cried.
I bet.
I cried because I had myself, and I wrote the Ding Dong book, had never thought about the fact that if the wheels came off a toy tractor, the back would be bigger than the front.
Right.
But they would. I mean, I had a tractor in my yard for years. I should have known that. And something about seeing how he took the story further than even I had made me think I have the right person. Then this is the next mock-up that I got. So this is the one, you guys, that I sent to everybody at Dabble this morning, and we all started weighing in and giving opinions. This is what Finn gave me. Obviously, the final result's going to be in color, right? But he just wanted to give me all the elements to see, does he kind of have it right? He was a little up in the air about the font. I loved the font.
Yeah.
Hank, I believe it was you who pointed out not all children read cursive. Kids today aren't necessarily taught cursive, and my kids read it.
Although that, and I have two of my kids, well, one of my kids and his wife are both school teachers. And one thing that they pointed out is that it's a very accessible cursive. It's not, you can not read and write cursive and you can still make out what's going on. You may have to work at it a minute, but it's not that difficult to decipher.
No.
So the typography is a win, in my opinion, in that it kind of bridges those things.
Right. And I'm with you. I loved it because to me, I thought it looks like one of the boys wrote it themselves.
Yes.
And so I sort of appreciated that piece of it. Doug tore apart the G in goes. The word goes does not bother me whatsoever. I like that it's not necessarily same direction, all uniform. To me, something, if it was all uniform, it would say to me like this wasn't done by hand. But if you look, none of his letters here are the same. Even the two T's in little, you can tell.
Right.
They're similar, but they're not exactly the same. So I know he's done this by hand. I think ultimately I told him the only piece that I sort of took away from this, because everybody was pretty torn about what they thought of this font up at the top, was the L and the I together were a little hard to read. And I think Hank, it was your daughter or daughter-in-law who pointed out kids might have a hard time right here because you can't tell that it's kind of two separate letters and that's supposed to be a big L. And so Finn said he would work on that pretty easy. Yeah. The only part of this that I did not like was the haircut on Score Scratch.
You mean the haircut that says that his mother doesn't love him?
The haircut that says my mom put a bowl over my head and just trimmed it hanging out. But again, I said I didn't like that piece, and Doug and Jacob piped up and they were like, we like that. That's the part we like. So, you know, my husband pointed out the eyeglasses don't have the bridge of the nose. And so they don't read like eyeglasses. And so Finn's going to go back. He's going to put the bridge of the nose back in. He was worried that I wasn't going to like that he put the bulbs on the side of the car because he couldn't really fit it on the front with the can. And I told him, oh, I was thinking that they would be on the front of the tuna can. But so like we're nitpicking all these little tiny pieces, right? But I think it's really fun. So again, that came to my inbox this morning and I was a blubbery mess.
A
But
blubbery mess.
my mom said, I just love seeing your name on the front of it. So
God love moms.
So anyway, that's where I am in my cover design, and I'm stoked. I also hired him to do a full page inside illustration.
Nice.
Finn's specialty is maps. And I'll tell you what, the first sign of a good book is when you open it up and there's a map. I'm like, I'm probably going to like this.
Yeah. And
so I want to map the farm.
And those are some of the little details that you can include in the book that let readers know that you care about this experience as much as you hope they will. Like that, you know, what you want is for them to go on this adventure and flip back to the map and say, okay, where am I now? Okay, now, you know, and it just become a second place they get to live for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. So he's going to do my illustration on the inside. I'm leaning towards getting him to do a map. And he's going to do all my little, you know, like underneath your number for each of the chapters, when there'll be that little drop-in illustration of something, he's going to do a little wrench for me. That's what I want as my little header for each of the chapters, this tiny wrench, because that's where the boys' trouble starts, is with a wrench in the beginning of the book. So they kind of show up, the tools show up over the course of the narrative. So anyway, that's where I am on mine. What do you think you're going to do, Hank, with yours? How are you going to?
I have a couple of illustrators that I'm talking to at the moment, that I have given the ideas to, and one of them I've never talked to before, but I was referred by a friend, and this is a different kind of cover than I've ever worked on before. This is darker, Southern Gothic, very ethereal, very you know, almost urban fantasy, except that it's not in an urban setting, but it's modern fantasy. There's not a great word for you know, it's like
contemporary fantasy. I'm trying to think.
Contemporary fantasy, maybe, you know, but fantasy mixed with Southern noir, whatever you call that, you know. So anyway, that's where I've just kind of started the dialogue with a couple of people, and we're kicking ideas around, and we'll probably get I'll probably get to this phase that you're in now next week and start. And I've been just kind of doing some mock-ups with AI and with Photoshop, just so that I can have a way to express kind of what I see in my brain, you know, and we'll see. Hopefully we'll kind of start dialing that in next week.
So when you work with the cover artist, the thing that thankfully I had, but had forgotten that they might ask for, is your jacket copy, which is next week's lesson. And so Finn has gotten to the point where he's asked me for mine, because a cover designer doesn't just design the front of your book, but they also design the back and the spine. And so he needed that information to go on the back of the book. So if you are kind of at the beginning of this process and you're putting together your sketches and you go to contact a cover designer, make sure that you kind of have that jacket copy ready to roll for them, because when they ask for it, they're probably ready to start putting it on the back cover of the book, and they're not going to want to wait a week for you to pull that information together for them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I will offer a bit of a um I'm just completely blanked on the word I was going to say. Um Contrast. Oh,
I was going to
jeez.
say
Um,
contradictory, but
no,
yeah, right.
contrast. So I have this sci-fi series that I've written that's published through Athon Books, and we're working on covers for that series now for them. And I have talked to traditionally published authors in the past who said that they got a little short questionnaire that they filled out, was
Mhm.
given to the cover artist, and the artist says, bam, here's your cover. And they got no input into it. I've talked to some other people that got a little bit of input. They got some editorial input. Can we change? Can we move this? But the design was the design. They just got they were able to tweak it a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, but I think the vast majority, like the designer says, here's your cover, and the
That's
decisions have been made up the chain and just handed down to you.
well, it's the
Um,
marketing team, right? It's the
it's the
marketing team
marketing
that's
team,
making the
right?
decisions. Yeah.
And my experience with Athon has been better than that. But my conversations with Steve Bowyer specifically, he has said, okay, your book fits into this bucket, and
Mhm.
this is what's selling in that bucket right now.
Mhm.
So, give me some design ideas you have, and I, kind of tell him, and then he says, okay, the first thing you said, not going to work. That's not selling right now. Other thing, that's more in line. We need to tweak it like this. So I did get input, but my input was definitely weighed against what is selling in the market right now.
Mhm.
One, your first reaction is, well, that's a little off-putting, and the second reaction is their job is to sell my book, and they know what's selling. So why am I worried about getting in the way of, that habit? So there's a
Yeah.
little bit of ego check that comes
Yeah.
into it, and then when you realize that this team of people are working to sell your book and to get more people to read your book, that spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down,
Gotta weigh it a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Where I have to appreciate, though, the idea of indie publishing means that I get to build my own brand, and I'm in control of that. So one of the like writers that I've been looking at, she's not in my genre. She writes like rom-coms, and they have covers that are very different that they sell, and you can almost from across Barnes and Nobles see them on the counter and know that shelf is rom-com,
yeah,
without even
yes,
just like science fiction, just fantasy, all of those. Like there's oftentimes there's flavors. Romantasy is a big one. Like you can tell a romantasy cover from 20 paces. You can't even read the title yet.
yep,
Yes, it's the billboard for your book,
yep,
right? So Emily Henry's got, I love that all her covers go hand in hand together. So she must have the same traditional publisher she probably got a multi-book deal. All the covers probably have the same designer. They all have the same feel. They all have the same color scheme. They all have enough similarities that then she's made her website match that. And it works so beautifully together. And I'm like, that's what I want. I want a website and a brand and a bunch of books that all work beautifully together like that. And so I guess that kind of leads me to ask you this, Hank, if
yeah,
you have some books with Atheon and then you have your own indie
yes,
published books,
yes,
are you going to try and make some of your future covers play
yes,
ball in the same? And what are you going to do with your old covers? Will you maybe update them so that
yes.
things Okay.
Yes, and I actually have several books that I have unpublished, so that I can do some
Yeah.
upgrades and to reposition them,
Yeah.
um, you know, and yeah, that the it gets to be a little overwhelming sometimes because you're like, okay, I've got this book and it needs to look perfect and my blurb needs to be perfect, and I only have, so long of a shot to get out there and make an impression. And some of that is true, that there is certain weight in the algorithmic, magic that happens in the Amazon machine. There is some weight that goes into a new book launch, and you know, but the reality is this is a product that, and I hate to talk about books in that sense,
It's a product,
but,
but they are. They're
right
business.
now, we have our publisher hats on, we don't have our writer hats on.
Yeah.
So this is a product that you've created, and if you have done your job, I'm not gonna say well, because there are certain reasons that sometimes it's not always true, but for a lot of genres and a lot of books, this can be an evergreen product that hopefully can be timeless.
Mhm.
And with a fresh cover, a new blurb, um, it can find new life again. We hear stories all the time of a book that kind of languishes at the bottom of the list for years, and then for whatever reason, um, it somebody finds it, they start telling people, and it starts just burning up the charts, and it becomes a sleeper hit, and that happens every day.
Mhm.
So just because you have something that's underperforming doesn't mean that's the end of that. And like we talked about with Hugh Howey, he's just a great example, because he's proved this out. He had several books that he'd published, the Mollified science fiction series specifically. There was a 6 or 7 book series, I think it was, and it didn't do anything. Some friends and family bought it. He had a few casual readers that liked it. It wasn't burning up any charts by any imagination. Wool comes out, people fall in love with his writing. They then dig through his back catalog. Those books start charting.
Mhm.
You just don't know,
Mhm.
but if you've done a good, and I say that, not everything is evergreen. That there are certain things you want to write that are timely, that
Mhm.
speak to a certain issue. Those things may not last on the shelf forever, but the majority of fiction can be written in a way where you can even address topical issues, but you can do it in a not time sensitive way. Anyway, so in the vast majority, the things you publish should be evergreen and should have the ability to find new life even down the road.
So are you going to let your Atheon covers sort of be the basis for how you update everything? Like
Yes.
you're kind of waiting for them to make that decision and then you'll base your other
Yes, and
decisions
then
off of that?
I'll take an eye toward, making sure my other stuff, at least, is not off-putting, at least feels like it's by the same person.
Yeah.
Even if, I've got stuff in different genres than sci-fi. I've got some mystery, and I've got some more, literary fiction, but, the color schemes, things like that, I there are things I can do to tie it all together
Yeah.
and at least make it look like it's not, a an insane person, gathered this,
Or just haphazard,
or
that.
just haphazard. Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so Emily's got a question that you're going to be better at answering.
Okay.
How many times do you go back and forth? Like, are you going to get 2 or 3 versions or even more? I mean, it probably depends on if you're indie published and you're paying the illustrator, you're probably going to have the ability to go back and forth until you feel like they got it right.
Yeah. And I think that's, why it's important to get some ideas together ahead of time. Like with your, cover illustration, you had a vision in your head that you communicated to him. He brought some different elements into it that maybe you didn't think of, but I think that this cover was not a surprise to you. I think you were glad, that he got it right, but
Mhm.
he got your vision, so you already had the vision.
Yeah.
So if he would have come back with with a modern photorealistic cover, you'd have been like, no, that's not what I want, So, um, I think having an idea in your mind ahead of time will help to cut that down.
Yeah.
And then
And it's
as you,
only fair to the artist too, by the
yes,
way, because
right,
if you're asking them to do work and they do a couple iterations and then you change your mind and expect them to start fresh, that's not a really good working relationship.
exactly,
So your iterations that you're going back and forth, you should be able to communicate it clearly enough that if this comes back and you don't like it, this is where you say, I want something completely different. Because then when they get to the point where now we're this far along,
right,
this has taken a couple hours worth of work to put together. And let's say they go even farther. And now it's been colored and it's been, a couple of little tweaks are done. And then you're like, you know what? I don't think I want the car
yeah.
on this now. You may have to pay to
What
start fresh.
can you go back to the first image?
Yeah.
Um, and when you get this first mock-up from the illustrator, you need to be able to tell them what you do and don't like and why, so that
Mhm.
when they do their next iteration, they're getting closer to your vision, not just throwing darts at the wall. That you need to be able to steer them so that like if you were to say, oh, the eyeglasses are completely wrong, they should look like this,
Mhm.
and give them some direction. There comes a point where if you're not an artist, you need to occupy the role of art director, be able to communicate what you want so that they can deliver the product that you expect and want.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think the things that you will be getting working with an illustrator, you'll get something really rough like this,
Yeah,
then you'll get it a little more polished, then you'll get it a little more polished, and then they're kind of checking in with you along the way so that they can fix these things before it becomes essentially like I have to wipe it clean and start over.
exactly.
So like if I looked at that first one and said, no, I think I'd rather have the pig in it. Like that's this time to change it.
Right.
But so do we have any questions? We seem to have less questions. I feel like you and I are doing uh a lot of talking. You guys have anything that you want to ask? I feel like Hank is going to be the go-to answerer. Oh, okay. Here's a good one. To clarify, is it either a flat rate or shared royalties for an illustrator slash cover designer? If you're sharing royalties with an illustrator, I know that's something that you would do if it was a picture book, right, Hank? Because illustrators and authors usually carry the same weight in picture
Yes. And I'm trying to think of a situation. I can't pull one up right now where someone has done a co-writing split with a cover designer. Uh, you have that option. You'll just need to list them as a co-author when you upload to Amazon KDP so that it knows how to do a royalty split. I think the vast majority, probably 99.99% of people just pay an illustrator or do a cover themselves. And
So yeah, mine is a flat rate.
yeah, flat
Um,
rate.
but I would think for a picture book, potentially for a chapter book. So NJ is saying, I have a children's book with an illustrator right now. Yeah, so you're going to see that more often in Kid Lit. So this is a chapter book. This is actually could be the next thing that I'm working on a little as I have a chapter book that I've finished that I want to find an illustrator for. But you can see as you flip through the book, it's heavily illustrated. So when you have an illustration on almost every page, even though this is a longer novel, that would be something that I could imagine you might have an illustrator with a royalty split on it. But yeah, you're going to see that in Kid Lit. I don't know if I've heard of it in, like Hank says, in adult books. If you're just talking covers, it's going to be pretty much, I think the standard thing is flat rate. And, again, it depends on who you hire. Pre-made covers, Hank, you said those run about $100 to $200, and they're
They
customizable.
some I've seen like $50.
Mhm.
You know, one of the best places that I've seen, you can there are a lot of cover designers with Facebook pages that you can follow or Instagram pages, and I know a bunch of them that will design some pre-made covers and occasionally will run specials. They've gotten a bunch created and they're trying to move some. They'll say, today and tomorrow, I've got these covers, $30, and and just try to move some. And um, that's again just finding a community, getting in, and just kind of following along. But I would expect 100, $200 for a really well designed, market friendly. Uh, that's probably a decent price. And um, yeah, so that's a
I
starting
know.
way.
I think Tiffany O'Keefe, who's our Ask a Book coach, she's doing a series of posts for the next 2 months in the community. She's doing thriller. She said, I think she was looking at around $500 for her thriller cover. I said, and mine was more like 1,000. And so,
Gotcha.
hers was not illustrated. Hers was more, a little simpler, plain graphic, but done professionally and just for her. So pre-made covers, you might not be the only person out there using it. And generally you can change some elements of it and things like that to make it more yours. But you can really run the gamut with this, you guys. And I know some illustrators charge way more than that for the traditional covers to the publishing houses.
Yeah.
And so I got a quote unquote deal on mine for being self-published. Believe they charge the trad pub people more than us because their pockets are deeper. Okay, so Shannon asked a question. We kind of talked about this, but if you go with traditional publishing, do you have less say in what the cover looks like? Yeah, it's
Yes.
the marketing team.
Yes. And depending on the company and the type of book and the positioning and all of that, you might get more or less input. But just know that the final say will probably not be your decision. You may get input, but their job is to sell that book, and they're going to put the cover on it that they think will sell the most copies.
I don't remember if it was Michelle Hazen telling me this story or who it was that she got a cover back from one of the traditional big five houses. And she's like, I hate that. I want something different. And they said, okay, and gave her a second iteration that was almost identical to the first iteration. And that's when she knew this isn't my choice.
Yeah. And
So
yeah, I've known some traditionally published people that hated their cover. I'm talking about hated it, and the option they chose was to leave it published for as long as their contract required, and then they were able to reacquire the rights and publish it themselves and slap the cover on that they always wanted.
Yep. Like Reed says, it may be way too much of a control freak to go to traditional publishing. By the way, Reed, I'm going to say it publicly so everyone can hear. I really like the cover that you made yourself. And I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, Reed might have a background in design. So
Yeah, it was pretty fantastic read.
it was amazing.
We all kind of oohed and awed over it for a
Yeah.
while. It was,
Yeah.
we are like, okay, Reed, show out.
Maybe Reed's the one you guys need to hire, not me.
Right.
All right, Lance has a great question here. Will the designer prepare all the formatting for print, color scheme, coding, and such? Do you mean inside of the book or just for the cover? I'm
Yeah,
guessing.
because the inside formatter is usually a different person than the
Mhm.
cover designer. But
Yeah.
the inside layout person, yes, will do all those things that you're talking about. But that's usually a different person. Okay, so he said cover.
Okay.
The
So I do know that Finn asked me today for my back cover copy. He asked me
Okay.
for a logo for my publishing house. He asked me for a couple of different things. So all the text essentially that goes on my cover, so front and back, he asked me for all of that. I did, as far as like color scheme go, I gave him, I haven't seen, obviously, because he's just given me the black and white pieces right now. I did tell him I wanted earthy colors, but the car itself being red and yellow, just like this, I wanted to pop and be really bright in the center. So I'm going to kind of wait and see what he gives me back, because I might end up using the yellow and the red
Yeah.
on my website. Although honestly, it's really hard for me not to use pink and green, because that's like my favorite. I don't know if you can tell. But I also like yellow. So I could go with yellow. Like I keep telling myself, I'm going to psych you up with yellow. My bed is yellow. My kitchen is yellow. So I'm like, I don't have a problem with yellow.
Right.
But yeah, he did ask for my input on a lot of that. I did have to give him all the text to format for the cover. But all of that's in his hands. That's why I'm paying him the big bucks to do it, is because he's
Yeah.
got the eye for all of that. And I did tell him, by the way, when I gave him my jacket copy, I said, listen, if it's not long enough, I have a longer version. If this is too long, let me know, because I will cut it down. Because I wasn't sure what he's putting on the back. I do know that his favorite character in my book is Handsome Dan the Rooster, and I have a sneaking suspicion he might squeeze a rooster
I
into
love
the
it.
back, because I may or may not have sent him a picture of the real Handsome Dan, who was one of my favorite roosters and was named after my father. So there's a lot of connections in this book. And so there's no telling what he's going to put on the back of it, but I have
Handsome
a feeling.
Dan is my new favorite. I haven't even read the book yet, and I love Handsome Dan.
You love
That's
Handsome Dan?
fantastic. Yeah.
He is a tattletale, Handsome Dan.
Oh,
Um,
last said I paid the print shop a lot for cover formatting. The cover cost as much as the rest of the book. Um,
yeah.
yes, that can be the case sometimes, but just remember, if the cover does its job properly, then it will sell your book, and the more copies you sell, the more you get to recoup those costs, and ultimately become rich and famous, like
Yeah,
Abby and me.
that's right. We're rolling in it, right? Okay.
You're right.
Shannon says this may be off topic, but with self-publishing, how do you print your book? I would assume you find a local printing company. God, what is wrong with my words today? My mouth. You want to? We're going to
Well,
cover this, right?
that
Hey,
is an option, Shannon, but more than likely that's going to be an expensive option. Uh, Amazon KDP, now you can sell paperbacks and hardbacks. There used to be a separate company called Create Space, and a couple of years ago they kind of absorbed it all into the Amazon KDP platform. But it used to be two different places that you would do it, but it's all in one place now. And it's much cheaper to go that route. Also, lulu.com, is that who you printed yours with, Abby?
yeah,
And
and
there's
actually, my husband just took my book because he was going to give it to my mother-in-law.
and
Yes,
there's
I
one
used
more that I'm blanking on. Who's
Ingram
the other
Spark,
one?
not the
Ingram
other
Spark.
one.
That's it.
Yeah,
Ingram Spark. And we're gonna go into deep detail on this in a couple of weeks when we get to that part. But no, that there are companies that do this. They specialize in it, and they've gotten the cost way down where it's much more affordable to deal with.
yeah. I have to say, so yesterday, weirdly enough, because social media is a really strange place, and
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you guys are like, my neighborhood has like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 different neighborhood groups.
Mm.
We have like the residents page, we have the rants page, which I try and stay off of because that is a scary place. We have all these different groups, but on one of them, somebody in the neighborhood, his wife had written a picture book, and she was looking for people to essentially beta read, although he didn't know that term, right?
Yeah.
This picture book, and somehow I got tagged in it, and yada, yada, yada. And so Anyway, long story short, the woman showed up yesterday in my driveway with a stack of her picture books that she had made. And
How about
she was
that?
like, will you come out and talk to me? So I went and stood at the fence and I brought my, beta read copy of my book from Lulu. Hers came from KDP. And one of the things we were talking about was the quality difference between the two. And she did not like the quality of her books. They felt different. Now hers were picture books. They had a
Yeah.
glossy cover. Mine had that really like nice, like buttery matte cover, which I love.
Right. Yeah, I
Right.
love those too.
So that was what mine had. Um, my inside paper, I don't think when I uploaded it to Lulu, I picked like the premium paper or anything because I'm
Right.
like, oh, this is my beta reading copy. But my paper felt nicer than her paper. Like she and I were standing there, we were sort of like comparing the two. And the one thing we said was neither one of us had ever ordered anything from Ingram Spark. And so we wondered how that compared just for like the overall experience. But we're going to be talking direct sales at some point, right, Hank? So we'll
Yes.
kind of talk about all of these things as we go on. So let's see. Oh, B says Isabel has hers printed as paperback, but then Reed says she's looking to redesign them. Yep. So I did have to tell my cover designer from the get-go what my aspect ratio was. And I personally picked 9:6. And I'll tell you why I picked 9:6. So these are the types of things that if you have your reader in mind, your end reader. Remember, I said my readers were reluctant readers and boys. If I had the smaller size, the 5:7, my book was going to be thicker than if it's 6:9. And a thinner book is one that a reluctant reader would be more likely to pick up. So in the end, even though those books might have been more expensive, I'm assuming it's more expensive, right? I didn't even price out the 5:7s because I knew it was going to make my book thicker and I did not want that for my end reader.
See that and knowing your end reader so
Mm-hmm.
that you can anticipate those decisions that you need to make. Because mine, I always go for the shorter, the 5 by
Yours will pick it up.
yes, yes. And my readers would prefer that format book more than the taller. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just kind of understanding your reader and how they're gonna have and how it's gonna fit on their bookshelves at home. And all
Mm-hmm.
those things matter when people buy books.
Yeah. There's Reed says Isabel says hers are too big at the moment, and B says, oh, it's because her hands are smaller because she's a child. But those two sizes, 5:7 and 6:9. If I go and I look at all the children's books that I have on the
Yeah.
shelf, it's pretty much split half and half. Those are two very common sizes. So I don't think you could go wrong with either one. But Hank had a reason for wanting his books to be fatter, and I had a reason
Yeah.
for wanting mine to be thinner. So those are things to take into consideration. And if that's not a consideration you have to take in mind, go with the cheapest option, you know?
Bear with me one second.
Oh, yes. I feel like Hank has a show and tell for us. So, yeah, let's see. Oh, Reed, you're saying they don't fit on the shelf at home the same. Interesting. I don't know. I would have to see a picture of her shelf. Also, my books are basically just all haphazardly stacked. Some are stacked up, some are slid side by side. There is zero rhyme or reason to my books here at my house. As a matter of fact, you guys look at the neat part of my office behind me. You do not look at this side of my office, which is just a booky mess. So,
Okay,
what you got?
so this was my first book that I published called Bloom, and it is the 6:9,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, where it's and then when I went to my more fantasy inspired, these are the smaller 5 by. You
Sevens.
can see
Yep.
the difference there in the size, and they are, more this format, and this is what really resonated with people. And this is also something to take into consideration. This book, Writer's Block, uh, on the Kindle store, do you see how
It
the
washes
white
out.
all kind of bleeds out?
Yeah.
Um, it doesn't do that when, and then when you come in, it's better.
Mhm.
But uh, on the Kindle, it looks very different than here. So that's another thing to think about when you're laying out your physical paperbacks. How it's going to look on paper as opposed to look on screen.
Mhm.
Uh, for the Kindle. So you've got, yeah. So those are just some things to consider. But I wanted to show you the size difference and why. And this is, when I did this one, I wasn't thinking about size. I just kind of took the defaults and,
Mhm.
and then as I started, when I got in my author proofs and started putting them on my bookshelf, I was like, well, these don't look like all the other books I have on here. And then, you start
No, funny.
realizing that all the little details matter when,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I don't know that we have any more questions. We've been going, look at this. We blow right past that 1 hour mark every time.
There the times are just a suggestion here.
You
Haven't you
know,
learned that yet, Abby?
I like talking, so we can. All right. Well, I don't see any more questions.
Yeah, I think we're
So,
good. Next week number 3, pulling up my cheat sheet here. We're talking jacket copy.
yeah.
So this is when we get to the nitty gritty of, selling that book. We've edited our book. We're looking at jacket copy. Now we're getting down to positioning our book to actually sell, and we're trying to summarize our book to make people want to buy it.
I'm
And
the
our
worst summarizer on the planet.
yeah, it's a skill that you definitely have to work at. But
I
our special guest for our special podcast episode next week is going to be old Doug,
Doug
Dougie
is
Fresh
coming.
himself, the Canadian
Um,
Wonder.
I have a cheat for you. I'll
Okay.
probably repeat this again next week, but I have a secret. And that's I made Jen Braxma write mine. She was my developmental editor.
Yeah.
So she's read the book. So I called her one day crying because I couldn't do it. And she was like, girl, I'll just do it for you. So Jen did it for me because I was a big baby. And I was like, I don't want to, Jen. I'm not good at this. So she actually wrote the first draft of it. And then I took it from there. And
Yeah.
I've probably done 4 or 5 different iterations of it, but I used hers as the foundation for it because there is nothing harder than writing 45,000 words and then being told you have to get it down to 100. And you're like, what? And I believe that in traditional publishing, someone else writes your back jacket copy for you, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Like,
You'll get some suggestion,
yeah.
but somebody's going to say, I'm a professional. I'll handle it. And you're like, okay. Yeah.
Actually, the ladies at Girl Friday Publishing said to me once, authors are really bad at writing their own jacket copy. And I was like, I think that tracks. I
Yeah.
will
Yeah.
not
Well,
argue.
you get so close to the work,
Mhm.
and to you this little subplot is the thing that's the most important to you, but that might not be the best selling point for it. That may be something that's better left for the reader to discover and have a
Yeah.
whole experience. And a someone who's outside the process sometimes is much better at assessing, from the 40,000-foot view and say, yeah, this is what's going to sell this book.
I mean, I felt like it was cutting 44,900 of my darlings. I was like,
Right.
can't.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Well,
Well, thanks for joining us, guys. Join us next week. We're going to talk jacket copy all week long, and we're going to have a dang fine time doing it.
that's right. I'm going to put my big girl panties on and talk about jacket copy. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Have a great weekend, y'all.